Two small-town police officers pulled over a sharply dressed black man. They did it simply because they could. What they didn't realize was that he was the new chief of internal affairs, their boss. It began innocently enough. A red light flickering on Highway 83, reflecting off a sleek black Lexus. Anthony Merriweather had been driving for hours. He wasn't speeding, hadn't swerved, his tags were current, and he was just 10 minutes from his hotel in downtown Macon, Georgia, where city officials awaited him the next morning. He wore a navy blue button-up, no tie, sleeves neatly rolled. An iced latte sat in his cup holder. He knew what was coming. In his rearview mirror, two officers emerged from their cruiser. One habitually tapped his flashlight against his hand. The other adjusted his belt, gazing toward the tree line as if he had all the time in the world. "Here we go," Anthony murmured to himself. The taller officer, Badge Henshaw, late 30s, strong-jawed, approached the driver's side. He lacked the patience of someone who'd seen much beyond his county line. His partner, Daly, a stockier man with a buzz cut and narrow eyes, circled to the passenger side. Anthony rolled down his window. "License and registration," Henshaw stated, "no greeting." "No problem," Anthony replied, moving deliberately. He handed over both documents along with his insurance card. "Where you headed?" Henshaw pressed. "Business trip. Staying near downtown Macon tonight." Daly peered through the window, spotting Anthony's leather briefcase on the passenger seat. "Fancy setup for a trip through Bibb County," he remarked. Anthony offered a slight smile. "State work. Long day." Henshaw scrutinized the license. "Merriweather. That your real name?" Anthony blinked. "Yes, that's me." Henshaw passed the ID to Daly. A silence hung between them. Then Henshaw asked, "Mind if we take a quick look inside the car?" "Yes, I do," Anthony said calmly. "Unless you've got probable cause." The air shifted. Daly's shoulders tensed. Henshaw leaned down, visibly annoyed. "You sure about that, Ferry? Am I being detained, officer?" Anthony asked. Henshaw didn't answer. Instead, he motioned to Daly, who yanked the passenger door open and gestured for Anthony to step out. Anthony complied, still calm. No raised voice, no sudden movement. Just tired eyes and quiet breathing. A passing truck slowed, its driver staring. Anthony stood in front of his car, hands visible as Henshaw began patting him down. "State job, huh?" Daly said from behind him. "You know how many times we hear that? You all love throwing that around like it's some kind of shield." Anthony said nothing. "You think dressing like that means something out here?" Henshaw added, gripping Anthony's shoulder a little too tightly. Still, Anthony remained silent. "You're awful quiet for someone with nothing to hide," Daly pressed. "What's really in that briefcase?" "My laptop," Anthony replied, "and tomorrow's meeting notes. I'd prefer not to have them searched without cause." Henshaw scoffed. "You're gonna tell us what we need to do now?" "I'm just telling you the law, officer." Henshaw stepped back, a mocking smile on his face. "You know what I think? I think you've got something in there you don't want us to see. Narcotics maybe? Something you picked up on your way through Macon? Just to stop, right?" "I'm not answering that." Daly walked back to the cruiser. Henshaw stayed close. "You ever been in trouble before, Merriweather?" "No." "Ever arrested?" "No." "You'll wait right here while we call it in," Henshaw said. "Just making sure you're legit." Anthony said nothing. He heard Daly calling in his plate number. The blue and red lights bounced off the car's polished exterior. A woman across the street stood outside a diner, her phone out. Anthony noticed. So did Henshaw. "Don't get cute," Henshaw warned. "You think filming means anything?" Anthony met his eyes. "It might." Daly returned. "Car's clean. Plates match. Insurance up to date." Henshaw paused. "Lucky day." Anthony stood still. "You're free to go," Daly added, his voice flat. "Always," Anthony said, walking slowly back to the driver's side. He got in, started the engine and drove away without a word. But they had no idea who they were talking to. A new kind of introduction. Anthony didn't drive far. Just 6 more minutes down the road, straight to the Macon Police Department's Central Precinct. He was already expected for an early morning internal audit. But instead of checking in, he pulled into a side lot near the employee entrance and sat in his car for a minute. Not to calm down, he was used to this. He just needed to gather his thoughts, decide how to handle what had just happened, and more importantly, decide if it was worth blowing the lid off everything on day one. Before he could shut off the engine, his phone lit up. A text from Chief Louise Barrington, the woman who'd personally requested his transfer. "Let me know when you're here. I'll meet you inside." He texted back, "Parking now. Walking in shortly." Inside the station things were quiet. A few officers chatted near the front desk. The bullpen smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Nobody looked twice as Anthony walked through the glass doors in a blazer, holding a slim folder and an ID badge. He didn't see them right away, but they saw him. Daly was at the printer, tapping it like it owed him money. Henshaw leaned against the hallway wall, sipping lukewarm vending machine coffee, still in uniform. Their eyes caught him at the same time. For a second, just a second, you could see it, the slow dawning realization. That familiar face they'd seen in the dark tonight, now stepping into their house. Not in jeans, not driving a Lexus, not silent, but walking in with a badge around his neck and a stack of documents under his arm. Henshaw's coffee hand dropped slightly. Daly actually muttered, "No way." Anthony didn't stop. He walked right past them, calm, collected, like he didn't recognize them, though of course he did. He reached the chief's office and gave a soft knock. "Come in," she called. Chief Louise Barrington, a white woman in her late 50s, former state trooper turned department head, sharp, fair, stood as he entered. "Anthony," she said with a smile. "Glad you made it. You're early." He handed her the folder. "Thought I'd get familiar with the place." She gestured to the seat. "How was the drive?" He paused slightly. "Just eventful." She raised an eyebrow. "Something happened?" Anthony glanced toward the hallway. "Let's just say 2 of your officers made an impression." Louise straightened up. "What do you mean?" "They pulled me over about 10 minutes from here. No reason. Harassed me a little. Tried to get into the car. Gave them nothing. They let me go once they realized I wasn't playing." Louise's smile faded. "You're kidding." "No, ma'am." "You get badge numbers?" "Didn't have to. They're outside." One with a buzz cut, the other taller, lean frame, coffee breath. "Henshaw and Daly," Louise said, sitting back, her face still. "They stopped you." He nodded. "That's not ideal." Anthony gave a light laugh. "No, Chief. It's not." She rubbed her temple. "And you're sure they didn't know who you were?" "Not a chance." Louise sighed. "We brought you in to look at complaints like this. Guess you didn't even have to dig." "I don't take it personally," Anthony said. "But if it happened to me, I'm wondering how many others just didn't bother reporting it." Louise leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" He looked her in the eye. "I want to meet with them today. No warning." "You sure?" "I won't yell. I won't threaten. I just want to see their faces when they realize who I am. That'll be enough for now." Louise nodded. "Give me an hour." Anthony stood. "I'll wait in the conference room." The reckoning begins back in the hallway. Daly and Henshaw were whispering by the vending machine. "I swear it's him," Daly said. "No way. That guy we stopped? That can't be. You think I don't remember faces? It's him. He even had the same watch on." Anthony walked past them again, this time heading toward the conference room with a slight grin. He didn't need revenge. He wanted accountability. He wanted them to sweat. But back at the station the story was about to flip. The conference room wasn't fancy. Just a wide table, 8 rolling chairs, and an old dry erase board that hadn't been wiped properly in months. One of the fluorescent lights overhead flickered. Anthony sat near the far end, facing the door. His jacket was folded neatly over the back of the chair. His badge and credentials were placed plainly on the table in front of him. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally the door opened. Chief Barrington stepped in with a clipboard tucked under her arm. Right behind her were officers Henshaw and Daly, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Henshaw had swapped his smug posture for something more rigid. Daly's eyes darted from the badge on the table to Anthony's face, then quickly away. "Officers," the chief said, keeping her tone even, "please take a seat." They obeyed without question. Henshaw sat with his arms crossed, trying to maintain some edge of control. Daly leaned forward with his hands on the table, already sweating under the collar. Chief Barrington cleared her throat. "Gentlemen, this is Mr. Anthony Merriweather. He's not from Internal Affairs. He is Internal Affairs." Division chief appointed 3 weeks ago. Pause. A long, uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Daly looked like he was about to say something but stopped himself. Henshaw squinted like the gears in his mind were trying to catch up. "You've got to be kidding me," Henshaw muttered. "Nope," Anthony said, calm as ever. "You remember pulling me over?" Daly coughed. "So we didn't realize." "I'm sure you didn't," Anthony cut in. "Let's not waste time pretending this was just a misunderstanding. You saw a man driving a nice car through your town. You made assumptions. And now here we are." Chief Barrington remained silent. She knew better than to interrupt. "Do you know how many complaints have come from this department in the last 6 months?" Anthony continued. 23. "And half of them, mention either of you by name." Daly opened his mouth again. "That's not, don't lie," Anthony said flatly. "There's footage. There's paperwork. There are recordings from civilians who've had phones yanked out of their hands. Traffic stops that escalated without cause. Searches conducted without warrants." Henshaw leaned forward. "You were just another guy, all right? You fit a profile. We were doing our job." "A profile?" Anthony said, eyebrow raised. "I'd love to know what that is. Because from where I was sitting, your job looked a lot like harassment." Daly let out a nervous laugh, but no one joined in. Chief Barrington finally spoke. "Mr. Merriweather has full authority to investigate any and all misconduct in this department. This isn't just a courtesy visit." Anthony nodded. "You'll both be placed under review starting today. That includes pulling your body cam archives, reviewing all use of force reports you've filed in the past year, and speaking with individuals named in complaints against you." Neither man said anything. "We'll begin with your stop last night," Anthony continued. "It was recorded by a bystander. I've already got the footage." Henshaw sat back, jaw tight. "So this is what, payback?" Anthony shook his head. "No. This is procedure. I don't need payback. I have the truth and I've got the power to do something with it." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Anthony stood up, slow and steady. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's systemic. You've been given years to treat people however you saw fit. That changes today." He grabbed his badge, placed it in his pocket and walked to the door. Daly finally spoke, his voice a little cracked. "Are we suspended?" "Not yet," Anthony replied without turning around. "But depending on what I find, you might wish you were." He walked out, leaving the 2 officers sitting in a silence that felt heavier than any shouting match ever could. But what he planned next caught everyone off guard. The ripple effect: the precinct buzzed with low voices and sidelong glances by the time word spread that internal affairs had shown up early. And not just anyone, a division chief. And not from some distant state office tucked away in bureaucracy, but a man who had already clashed with 2 of their own on his way in. Anthony could feel it in the air the moment he returned to his temporary office. A narrow corner room on the 2nd floor with a creaky chair and too much fluorescent light. Officers walked past his open door but avoided eye contact. Some were quiet out of curiosity, others out of guilt. Still, Anthony didn't rush. He sat at the desk, pulled out his notepad and began writing a list. Not names, not charges. Patterns. He circled one word at the top of the page. Discretion. That's what officers always used to justify their behavior. "I use my discretion." But too often, discretion became a shield for profiling, bullying, or worse. He was still writing when a knock came. Chief Barrington peeked in. "Got a minute?" "Of course." She stepped in, shutting the door behind her. The 2 officers there rattled. "They should be. You want them off the street for now?" Anthony thought about it. "No. Let them sweat. Let them see me walking the halls. Let them wonder how deep I'm digging." Louise folded her arms. "You've got everyone's attention." "Good. I want every officer here to stop and think twice the next time they touch their belt, raise their voice, or pull someone over because of a gut feeling. Some are already pushing back," she warned, "saying this whole thing's a witch hunt." Anthony chuckled. "Then let's give them a fair trial. I'll speak at roll call tomorrow. Face them directly." Louise paused. "You sure?" "Absolutely." The next morning, just after 7 a.m., the officers gathered in the break room. They leaned against filing cabinets, sipped burnt coffee, adjusted their vests. Some rolled their eyes, others looked genuinely curious. Anthony walked in alone. He didn't shout, didn't carry a folder or a stack of papers. He just stood near the front with his hands in his pockets and a slow, steady look. "I won't take much of your time," he began. "I know you don't want me here. That's fine. I'm not here to be liked." A few heads tilted, a few eyes narrowed. "I'm here because this department has a pattern. I've seen the complaints. I've seen the videos. And unfortunately for some of you, I experienced it firsthand." The room grew tense. "I'm not a threat," he said, "unless you've got something to hide." A younger officer in the back shifted uncomfortably. Another near the vending machine cleared his throat. "I don't care how long you've worn that badge or how many times you've been told you were doing things the right way. If you treat people like suspects before you see them as humans, you are the problem." A long pause. "I'm not here to destroy your careers. I'm here to make sure the badge you wear means something, that people in this city don't flinch when they see your lights in the rear view." He scanned the room. Even Daly and Henshaw were there, standing off to the side. Neither spoke. Neither smirked. Anthony finished simply, "You will respect the people you serve or you will answer to me." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Also, every squad car will have its body cam data pulled from the last 60 days. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about." He walked out without another word. Daly looked at Henshaw. "He's not bluffing." Henshaw shook his head. "No, he's not." Uncovering the system back upstairs, Anthony poured himself a weak cup of coffee and opened his laptop. Emails were already flooding in. A few officers wanted to speak off the record. Others had questions. Some even thanked him quietly in the hallway. Louise stepped into his office later that morning, her face unreadable. "Whatever you said down there," she said, "it shook the tree." Anthony took a sip. "Good. Let's see what falls." But this wasn't just about them. It was bigger. Most people assumed Anthony Merriweather was the kind of man who just ended up in positions of power. Degrees on the wall, clean-cut, well-spoken, the type of guy who always knew the rules and played them better than everyone else. But what they didn't know, and what Anthony rarely shared, was the night he sat in the back of a squad car at 17, hands cuffed, face pressed against a cracked vinyl seat, terrified that his life was about to disappear because of something he hadn't done. He had been walking home from his after-school job at a grocery store in Athens, Georgia. It was cold that evening and he'd taken a shortcut through a neighborhood he didn't usually walk through. Someone had just reported a car break-in. The description was vague: tall, black male, dark hoodie. That was it. That was enough. He remembered the flashing lights, the voice on the loudspeaker, the sharp command to get on the ground. He remembered how the officer's boot pressed into his shoulder blade even after he was cuffed. And he remembered the old woman on the porch across the street, not because she helped but because she looked away. He sat in that squad car for nearly 40 minutes before another officer arrived, holding blurry CCTV footage and saying, "That's not our guy." No apology, no explanation. They took the cuffs off and told him he could go. He walked home shaking, not from fear anymore but from something deeper: shame, rage, confusion. And the worst part, the quiet understanding that no one was going to do anything about it. That night shaped everything. Anthony never told his mother, she would have panicked. He didn't even tell his closest friends. He just started asking questions. About how laws worked, about who had authority and who didn't, and more importantly about how to challenge people who abused it. He didn't set out to be a cop. In fact, he hated the idea at first. But in college, a professor in a criminal justice seminar changed his perspective. "You want the system to change?" the professor said. "Then be the one who writes the report, not just the one who complains about it." So Anthony joined the force. Not to play hero but to understand how things worked from the inside. He learned quickly, kept his head down, stayed quiet when he had to, spoke up when it mattered. And when he saw officers manipulating their reports or using unnecessary force or lying in court, he didn't just memorize it, he documented it. By 35, he was already running internal audits in larger departments across the Southeast. His name circulated in legal circles as the guy who didn't flinch when things got messy, the kind of investigator who made friends nervous and got quietly thanked by those without a voice. But all the promotions, awards, and speaking invitations never erased that feeling from the squad car. He carried it. And when he heard that the Macon PD was under scrutiny for a rising number of civil complaints, many racially motivated, it didn't take him long to say yes. "I don't do gentle," he told Chief Barrington during their first call. If you want someone to slap wrists and write memos, I'm not your guy. She hadn't hesitated. We've had enough of that. Now sitting in his office with a notepad covered in observations, names and timelines, Anthony thought back to that 17-year-old version of himself. Would he be proud of this man today? Maybe. Maybe not. But he'd definitely recognize him. Because even now, at 42, respected professionally, untouchable, Anthony knew that most people still saw the hoodie before the badge. And that's why he worked the way he did. Not to punish but to hold people to the standard they claimed to believe in. He stood, stretched, and glanced out the window at the squad cars pulling in for the morning shift. Some of them still saw him as a threat. That was fine. He wasn't here to be anyone's friend. But his mission now wasn't personal. It was systemic. Digging deeper, finding truth. By the end of Anthony's action-filled day at the precinct, the whispers had turned into silence. Officers who had casually greeted him Monday morning now walked past with stiff nods or avoided him entirely. Even the admin staff grew cautious, triple-checking every file they handed him. And Anthony preferred it that way. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to do what no one else had been willing to: peel back the layers of a department that had for too long operated without oversight. He started quietly, not with accusations but with access. He requested archived bodycam footage. Not the highlight reels used for training but the full shifts, the boring hours, the traffic stops that never made it into official documentation. He asked for ride logs, booking sheets, dispatch transcripts, and internal memos dating back 18 months. His inbox was soon overflowing. And then came the interviews. Anthony didn't begin with the loudest voices. He started with the rookies, those still green, still too new to lie well. He sat them down one by one in the interview room and asked the same opening question: "What do you think needs to change in this department?" Some dodged it. Some shrugged. A few told him what they thought he wanted to hear. But a handful, young officers who'd seen things that didn't sit right, gave him more than he expected. Like the Hispanic officer who mentioned how Daly once joked about keeping zip ties in his glove box, just in case someone runs. Or the young black patrol woman who said she stopped volunteering for overnight shifts because she didn't trust Henshaw when backup was needed. And those weren't accusations, they were patterns. Small flags, consistent echoes across different voices. Anthony logged every statement and compared them with what was on paper. Sometimes they matched. Often they didn't. Meanwhile, Daly and Henshaw kept quiet, kept to themselves. But Anthony noticed they checked their computers a little more often now, kept their desks unusually tidy, like they were waiting for a hammer to drop and didn't want anything left lying around when it did. Then late Wednesday afternoon, something unexpected happened. A plain manila envelope slid under Anthony's office door. No name, no markings. Inside, 5 printed screenshots of bodycam footage. Each one showed different officers during separate traffic stops. In all 5, the drivers were black. In all 5, the stops were minor: failure to signal, rolling through a stop sign, tinted windows. But in every shot, the expressions on the officers' faces were the same: annoyed, superior, and more than once, smiling during a moment of intimidation. Anthony stared at the photos for a long time. Someone inside the department wanted him to see this. He checked the timestamps on the screenshots. 3 were from earlier in the year, 2 were only weeks old. The next morning, he called an Officer Cameron Ladd, a tech-savvy analyst in records who'd been in the department under 2 different chiefs. "I need metadata on these screenshots," he said, handing them over. "Find out who downloaded them or who paused bodycam footage at this exact frame." She didn't ask why. She just nodded and took the envelope. Within 2 hours she returned. "Came from an internal viewing terminal," she said. "Username, Arnett." Anthony raised an eyebrow. "Detective Martin Arnett?" "Yep. Downloaded 3 days ago. Must have printed them off during his lunch shift. Probably didn't want it traced through email." Anthony leaned back in his chair. Martin Arnett had been on the force 15 years, known to keep to himself. Never made much noise but never backed down from it either. He wasn't part of any crew, wasn't part of the boys' club Henshaw liked to run during overnight patrols. Anthony found him in the garage checking his cruiser. "You got a second?" Anthony asked. Arnett looked up, no surprise in his eyes. "You get the envelope?" "I did." Arnett leaned against the hood. "I don't want a medal. I just can't watch this place rot from the inside anymore. I've got a kid. He's gonna grow up here. I need to believe it can be better than this. Anthony nodded. You willing to make a statement? Arnett hesitated, then said, off the record for now. That's fine, Anthony replied. You already said a lot by sliding that envelope. He walked away grateful but knowing one man's courage wouldn't be enough. He needed proof, patterns, and above all the one thing this department had never faced: consequences. But what he uncovered was worse than anyone expected. The Monday lists and public outcry. The further Anthony dug, the less surprised he became, and somehow the more disgusted he felt. It started with simple mismatches. Body cam footage that didn't align with written reports. Traffic stops described as routine in paperwork that showed unnecessary aggression on video. There were citations issued with no verbal explanation, people pulled from cars without warning, searches made without consent. But that was just the surface. One clip in particular made Anthony pause. It was daily night shift, dashcam rolling. A young man barely out of his teens standing next to his rusted sedan. No weapon, no yelling. Just a quiet voice asking, "What did I do wrong?" Daly replied, "You looked nervous when you passed me." That's enough. The video cut to the teen handcuffed sitting on the curb. Nothing in the report mentioned fear. Nothing about tone. Nothing about the kid's voice cracking when he asked if his mom could be called. Anthony stared at the paused footage for a long time, then hit play again. Then rewound it. That phrase, "That's enough." That's what too many officers believed. That gut instinct gave them permission for anything. It didn't end there. He pulled Henshaw's last 12 use of force reports. 11 involved black men. 10 of those claimed the suspect had made threatening gestures. Only 3 were backed up by video. The rest were vague at best, and one outright contradicted by footage showing a man stepping back with his hands up before Henshaw shoved him into a wall. Anthony built a timeline, added timestamps, cross-referenced arrest logs with dash cam files. The patterns screamed louder than the footage itself. And then came the final push. An anonymous email sent to the department's general inbox, flagged and forwarded to Anthony's temporary station address. It read simply, "If you want to know what's really going on, ask about the Monday lists. They don't write them down, but everyone knows." Anthony blinked. Monday lists? He started asking quiet questions, just subtle ones, especially to the officers who didn't hang out with Daly and Henshaw. He avoided direct phrasing, just casual remarks about scheduling or routines. It didn't take long. One officer, barely older than 24, mentioned that every Monday during briefing, there was a loose list of target neighborhoods, places where extra attention was expected. No official memo, just verbal suggestions. Usually low-income areas, mostly black. You didn't push back? Anthony asked. The young officer shrugged. I mean, it's not like they told us to find something, but if you came back empty, you heard about it. Anthony's pen hovered over his notebook. Who gives the Monday list? The answer was fast: Henshaw most weeks. Sometimes Sergeant Clive. That was enough. He walked straight to Chief Barrington's office and laid the files on her desk. This department has normalized harassment, he said. It's not even covert, it's built into how they start their week. Louise scanned the papers, her lips pressed tight. What are you asking for? I want a suspension for both Henshaw and Daly while I finalize this report. If they stay on the streets, someone's going to get hurt or worse. You have enough to justify it? Anthony looked her square in the eye. Yes. By the next morning, both officers had been pulled from duty pending formal review. Neither took it well. Daly threw a fit in the locker room, slammed his badge on the table and shouted about witch hunts and soft politics. Henshaw didn't say a word, just stared at Anthony as he passed by, eyes cold, jaw tight, like a man who had never been told no before. Anthony didn't flinch. He was already writing the formal report, already formatting names, timestamps, and summaries. He would submit it to the state attorney's office and the civilian review board within the week. Still, something tugged at him. This wasn't the end. Something darker still felt buried, and Anthony wasn't done digging. But when the town heard about it, everything changed. From turmoil to transformation. By Friday morning, the story had broken. Local reporters got wind of the suspensions. A leaked email from an internal staff member, no one ever claimed it, shared part of Anthony's preliminary report. The screenshots, the stop-and-search patterns, the Monday lists, all of it. Within hours, WMAZ News was parked outside the station, camera crews asking questions no one seemed eager to answer. Is it true officers were targeting black residents based on verbal lists? Why were body cam reports missing from internal reviews? Has the police chief seen the footage? The department scrambled to contain the fallout. Chief Barrington gave a measured press statement, acknowledging the audit and confirming that 2 officers were on administrative leave. She didn't say their names, but everyone in Macon already knew. Anthony stayed inside. He wasn't interested in the cameras. He was interested in what happened next. Because for every news story that stirred outrage, there were also people angry at him. Anonymous voicemails began filling the station line. Who the hell do you think you are? You're trying to tear this town apart. You don't belong here, outsider. Anthony didn't flinch. He'd expected the backlash. What surprised him, though, were the others. The black business owner who showed up unannounced to shake his hand. The elderly woman who dropped off a letter at the front desk, handwritten, thanking him for finally making this place feel a little safer. The high school senior who emailed him saying he was thinking of going into law enforcement now because he finally saw someone who made it mean something. But not everyone welcomed the change. A small protest formed outside the station that afternoon, not for justice but against it. A handful of locals holding signs that read, "Support our police," and "This is a setup." And in the middle of it, standing at the curb with folded arms, was Officer Henshaw, off-duty in jeans and a polo but unmistakably present. He didn't say anything, just stared at the building. Anthony watched him through the blinds of his office window, sipping lukewarm coffee. He didn't feel fear. He felt the weight of how hard this was going to be. Later that evening, Anthony was invited to attend the city council's emergency session. The room was packed, not just officials but residents. Some angry, some hopeful, some just confused. A man in a bow tie stood up from the third row. "My son was pulled over twice last month for nothing," he said. "He told me he was scared to drive to work. I didn't believe him. I thought he was exaggerating. But now..." His voice cracked and he sat down. A woman in her 40s stood next. "We don't want this whole department gone. We want it cleaned. We want it to mean something again." One councilman looked directly at Anthony. "You really think this can be fixed?" Anthony stood slowly. The room quieted. "I don't promise miracles," he said. "But I promise this. No badge should carry more weight than the truth. If you want this department to serve everyone, then we hold it accountable. Starting now." That earned a few claps, a few nods. After the meeting, Chief Barrington found him in the hallway. "You spoke like a mayor," she said. He smirked. "Let's not get crazy." But the damage and the healing had begun. Henshaw filed a formal grievance the next morning, claiming the investigation was biased. Daley tried to contact a lawyer, but no one in town wanted the case. Meanwhile, the Civilian Review Board had called an emergency vote. Should the Macon Police Department undergo a full outside audit? The result was unanimous. Yes. Anthony's role was now expanding. What began as a quiet audit of misconduct had become a full-blown restructuring of leadership, policy, and trust. And there was no turning back. The enduring standard, but Anthony had one final move to make. 2 weeks after the public exposure, the station felt different. Not quieter, just heavier, like the weight of old habits was finally being noticed. Doors that used to swing wide open now closed slower. Conversations paused when Anthony entered a room. More eyes looked up but not away. He hadn't issued any fiery speeches since the council meeting, no dramatic changes. Just quiet work, day by day, peeling the layers back. But some changes came anyway. The police chief resigned. Chief Louise Barrington called Anthony into her office early one morning. She sat at her desk, badge in a velvet box beside her keyboard. "I've done what I can," she said. "But if this town's going to move forward, it needs a different voice. One that doesn't come with my baggage." Anthony respected her choice. She hadn't fought the audit. She had stood behind him when the pressure got hot. But she also knew when it was time to step aside. "You're not quitting," Anthony said. "You're making space. That matters." She nodded. "You better make this count." Her departure rippled through the department. The city appointed an interim chief, Vivian Cross, a black woman who'd spent her entire career cleaning up departments like this one. Tough, fair, and notoriously allergic to politics. With Cross now leading and Anthony continuing the audit, the department shifted from fear into action. Mandatory retraining began for every officer, starting with traffic stop protocols, use of force policy and civilian complaint handling. Not just check-the-box seminars, but hands-on workshops led by external consultants. A few officers pushed back. "This is overkill," one mumbled during roll call. Anthony overheard and replied without raising his voice, "You're welcome to find work somewhere else." That shut it down. But resistance came from outside too. A local talk radio host spent a full hour ranting about outside interference and cultural overcorrection. Anthony didn't respond. He didn't need to. The facts were already louder. Complaints from residents dropped within 2 weeks. Community members began showing up for precinct open houses. Church groups delivered lunch to the staff. A few high school students visited as part of a civic leadership program. Even skeptics noticed the shift. And yet, for every step forward, Anthony remained cautious. One afternoon, Officer Cameron Ladd stopped by his office, holding a printed report. "This just came in," she said. "Officer Raymond took a routine stop this morning. White pickup, tinted windows." But the driver recognized him, called him by name. Anthony raised an eyebrow. And she said she remembered Raymond from before. Said he used to act like he was in charge of the whole street. "Today," she said, he looked her in the eye. Told her exactly why she was stopped. No attitude. Just did the job. Anthony smiled faintly. Progress. Still, he wasn't interested in surface-level change. He pushed for permanent reforms. Every patrol car would now have a dual audio body cam synced to the officer's badge mic. Disciplinary actions could no longer be buried in department-only reviews. They had to be reported to the Civilian Review Board. A new community liaison role was established, responsible for building connections with neighborhoods often over-policed and underheard. Some of the older officers grumbled, but some younger ones leaned in. Like Officer Janelle Briggs, 2 years on the force, who requested to be reassigned to the newly formed Community Trust Unit. Or Officer Malik Fenner, just out of the academy, who asked Anthony during one meeting, "How do we make sure we don't end up like them?" Anthony's answer was simple: accountability. Every day. No shortcuts. He spent long nights writing, drafting final summaries, cross-referencing reports. Each name on the paper wasn't just an entry. It was someone who had been stopped, questioned, or hurt and often forgotten. Anthony didn't want them forgotten, not anymore. The final version of the audit would be published publicly the following month. He'd be long gone by then, back to Atlanta onto the next assignment. But he hoped Macon remembered what came from this. Not him, not the scandal, but the shift. The realization that trust in a badge isn't automatic. It's earned. But beneath it all, Anthony knew change takes time. A quiet exit. Anthony stood alone in the squad lot on his final day. The morning sun cast a long shadow across the asphalt, and the air was thick with humidity. Officers passed by with quick nods, some genuine, some out of habit. He wasn't watching for gratitude. He just wanted to see if they'd still meet his eyes. Most did. He closed the door to his temporary office slowly, holding the final printed audit in one hand. 140 pages of truth. Names, timestamps, quotes, and footage logs. None of it exaggerated, none of it softened. Just what happened and who made it happen. The station was quieter than usual. He walked the halls not to make a scene but to say a quiet goodbye. A few officers thanked him. One shook his hand. 2 avoided him altogether. He expected as much. Downstairs near the main entrance, Vivian Cross caught him before he left. "Report looks solid," she said, tapping the folder. "Hard to argue with facts." "I don't need them to agree with me," Anthony replied. "I just need them to know someone's paying attention now." She smiled slightly. "You sure you want to go back to Atlanta?" He nodded. "I was never meant to stay here. This was just part of the job." She looked him in the eye. "Still, you didn't treat it like just a job. That's rare." He didn't answer right away. Then, "I had to." Outside, the media trucks were long gone. The protests had fizzled out. And on the street across from the station, the same diner where Anthony had been watched, judged on his first night, now had a young black man in uniform eating breakfast on the patio. Anthony paused, took in the moment. That kid might never know what had happened behind the scenes, but he'd walk into shifts now with fewer targets on his back. And that mattered. He drove out of town with the windows down, letting the wind wash through. He didn't need ceremony. He didn't need applause. He just needed to know that for once, power had worked for someone instead of against them. Later that week, back in Atlanta, Anthony gave a small talk at a criminal justice symposium. Nothing fancy, just a folding chair, a microphone, and a group of students still figuring out where they fit in the world. One of them, a quiet girl in the front row, raised her hand. "Do you ever think it's pointless?" she asked. "Like none of it really changes?" Anthony looked at her for a second, then replied, "It changes. Fully. Sometimes painfully. But the point isn't to change everything at once. It's to stand between what people can get away with and what they should be held to. That space. That's where change begins." He stood, collecting his notes. Every system, every badge, every desk, every courtroom is only as good as the people willing to hold it accountable. So ask the hard questions. Say the quiet things out loud. And when someone tells you that what you're doing doesn't matter. He paused, making sure they were all watching. Ask them why it's making them so uncomfortable. The room stayed still. No applause. Just quiet thinking, the kind that lingers. And that was enough for Anthony. Because change doesn't look like a parade. It looks like paperwork. Like policy. Like someone refusing to let silence win. Don't judge too fast. You never know who you're talking to. And more importantly, who's watching you.